You have ambiguous grief as well, where you're just grieving the things that were there and that are a little present now.
Have you ever felt that gut-wrenching, life-shifting pain of loss? Not just the loss of a loved one, but the loss of the life you thought you were going to live. Our guest today knows that feeling intimately. Our conversation is with Megan Young, a grief and life transition coach whose powerful coaching method is deeply rooted in her personal journey navigating the sudden, devastating loss of her sister. Today, we're kicking off a two-part series. We'll talk about why they face an especially challenging way to process grief when their primary communication method is impaired, and how speech pathologists and communication partners can truly help support them. Then, in a must-listen episode, we shift our focus to care partner grief. Because when a stroke happens, it doesn't just happen to one person, it happens to both of you. This conversation is going to change how you think about loss and recovery.
What's really unique about those who are healing or recovering or just literally trying to figure out this new life with aphasia is that all of those things that we're taught about grief and how to express it and how to communicate your thoughts and feelings to your loved ones, a lot of that part of grief has been taken away. And so we're having to find new ways of expression, because if grief is stored in our bodies, which it is, and you're starting to feel it in different ways, whether it's the aches and the pains alongside what you're already dealing with, then we're just trying to go day by day with even thinking about how we're going to express and or release that grief. We're going to live with that grief and what was, but how can we release it so that it's not this additional destruction in your heart, your mind, and your soul?
Wow. Destruction. I got chills
Mm,
when you said that word because it puts a name to what people are feeling.
yeah.
Devastation, destruction. So, in this episode, we're going to focus on aphasia survivors. There's a reason you're here. You survived the stroke. So, how do we help you move forward when grief can be such a barrier?
It's not only is it a barrier for what you've lost, it's also whatever was quote right about your life, whether you had like the greatest support in family, or you were able to do all these hobbies, or you had your work as a foundation, and then so you're trying to redefine who you are, your identity. You have ambiguous grief as well, where you're just grieving the things that were there and that are a little present now. You may be able to visualize you playing golf, and it's mourning the missing even when it's kind of there too. So there's so many things going on with grief. It's not just, and that itself also feels frustrating, because if you're a type A controller like myself, it becomes this point of frustration that you never knew you had to face. And that frustration is also the barrier, along with some of the medical that you're dealing with. That now, how do we move past that in order to get to the rebuilding stage alongside that grief?
Yeah.
No one is here to say that this isn't as bad as it is in your head, because it is. It is as bad as you think it is. However, what we can't replace, what we can't go back to, that is lost and can't be restored. However, what is going on now? What are some of the things that we can really focus on now that will bring us, what that will bring us to a neutral state? It doesn't have to be positive. We're looking for the baby steps into living life again alongside the grief. It's a frenemy, you know it intimately, but it's not going to rule your world and dictate how you move through life.
Yeah. And nobody would think that grief is a friend. But I
Yeah,
think in a way we have to think of grief as it's part of the process and we might as well acknowledge it so that we can move past it.
right.
How else you mentioned golf, but maybe they were working or looking forward to retirement. Their world was huge. And then
Hmm.
they have a stroke, whether it's a stroke with aphasia or a stroke and everything that goes with it, and now their world is tiny. And they literally have to, as I think of it, rebuild very consciously, very intentionally to get back to that larger circle, that ability to find purpose and meaning. And grief may be walking, maybe their shadow along that entire rebuilding process.
Oh, that's perfectly said. You have a choice. And there's always a time that I like people to give themselves, especially in the beginning, to grieve, make mistakes within that grief. I myself found in the first 2 years of my own grief, I realized how I was pushing people away. I was making terrible decisions. I was attaching myself to things that I thought were going to help and they weren't. So you have to give yourself a little grace in the beginning. You're working through this new life. You are learning how to be in your own body again, which is unlike anything else. I want everyone to give themselves some space to be whatever, if it's that you're going to be a little more quiet in the way that you react or respond, whatever way that looks like for you, that is okay. And people need to understand that. There's always this point in everyone's grief, the ugly cry, where you're just like uncontrollable crying, and you finally get that 1 second of breath. That's the moment. That's where you turn and you redirect your grief into a different direction that's going to be more calming, more soothing, more equipped to hold the grief better. Allow yourself to be, if I can cuss, shitty for a little bit, if that's what you need to be. And then you're going to find this moment where you're sick of your own mess, sick of your own behavior. That would be the goal there. And that's where we're going to transition into the healthy type of grief. And with that, there's steps that I can share, but also back to your question about how you would describe the frenemy. So I've had a frenemy before in high school, and they taught me a lot about myself. Not only insecurities or what I didn't like or what I was fearful of,
Mm-hmm.
but really the decisions that I wanted in friends or people in my life moving forward.
Okay, so we've done some labeling. Can we get tactical? Can we start giving some steps? I'll start with a story. I had this one particular individual who was in the prime of his
Mm.
career, the top rung of the ladder, and he was super happy. Great wife, great adult kids. He traveled, he worked, he entertained. And then, from an unknown heart condition, he had a stroke. He got back most of his body relatively quickly, but his words failed him. And he was in an industry that needed his words. He was in sales. You can imagine how hard that was. When I met him, he was 2.5 years into his recovery. He was still doing speech therapy, but he had to figure out, who am I now? And what was really interesting in the first couple of months working together, it became apparent to me that he had never grieved having had the stroke. It was no cause of his own, it was an unknown condition that caused it. But he, as a result of it, had pushed his wife and his kids away and all of his friends, and he was isolating himself because of the shame he felt. Once he acknowledged this, it wasn't that quick, but once we started talking about it, he realized what he had been doing. And by
Mm.
that realization, we were able to put some steps in place, baby steps, little steps that he could start taking to work through this. As he rebuilt his connection with his wife, he realized he had nothing to be ashamed of. She was his biggest supporter and love, and him pushing her away not only hurt her, hurt their relationship, but didn't give him the benefit of moving forward.
Mm. Wow.
So since that time, I work this into my therapy because it's not only the grief we have to work through, we also have to work through identity.
These days, we'll have to work through an identity shift. What a lot of people in his position are finding out is that they took their talent, their superpower that they were really good at and made a living off of. It relied on it for a lot of reasons: self-worth, financial connection. When someone has never had to experience an identity shift, the kids now have that a lot more, and they're realizing identity shifts quicker because it is a forever changing world of who are you and then how do you function in this world given your gifts and talents, and what if that gift and talent is then taken away or not of use anymore when it comes to identity and what worth you're putting in yourself. It's out there to learn from and to respect and know that this is a thing. When someone says, the loss of my identity, there's more weight on it these days because I think more people are understanding what that actually means. So there's that foundation, and that's really important when it comes to men who may not interact in a friendship that is based on other things. Females have deeper connections with other females, so identity doesn't fully consume the topics. The foundation would be that we have to acknowledge and give respect to what was built. There has to be a time where we stop and say, oh my gosh, look at what I've done. This is amazing. And then the second part to that is, I want to know how that happened. How did you do that? Essential point, because in those little bitty nuggets of information that they're going to give you or anyone else, whether that's writing it down or showing you things from their childhood, all of that are their breadcrumbs into where you got where you were. Now, look, people are going to say, I think my husband would even say, well, I just was talented in this and that. No, no, no.
No,
There
no,
were
no,
people.
no. Choices that had to be made. There were relationships, opportunities you took or you didn't take, Megan, and I hadn't
Yeah,
considered it from that perspective. Keep going.
that's what we first want to do is I really want them to honor that loss by giving it its light. Okay, I was raised a certain way, my family contributed to it this way, and then maybe they didn't, and that's why I went this way. I need them to understand themselves so deeply from when they develop their core belief system between 1 to 7 years old, and then how that morphed over time. Obviously, that core can change. However, it's always from community experience that's when those are cemented into you. So that's what I need them to honor and understand. Then that goes into, if I was good at X, Y, and Z, that also can translate into these things. And that's where someone else can come in and give words to where you're not thinking or you don't fully see the light in the tunnel. It's where someone can actually give you a little bit more guidance.
Mm-hmm.
But the first part has to be you. You have to really understand how you got where you were and where you are today. That could even be in different buckets too. That could be personal, professional, and spiritually where you landed.
So, if they need to understand how they got to where they were up until the time of that stroke, what would you say would be the next step in the process?
Then it's really naming the loss. What are we really in the depths of grief and loss? What are we really missing? Some
Yes.
of the things that they really miss could be simple, but yet they hold a lot of weight. Or maybe they are a communicator more than they are someone who would want to hold your hand. That's just not who they are. That's not how they are wired. So they're having to learn how to do things they've never had to do before to express themselves. I think the shame around you really are losing or have lost. And what is hard for me now? Let's see. What am I going to miss about the expectations I had for this time in my life, like the things that you thought were going to happen? I just want to say that it is so different than any type of grief. You do have to understand that this is extremely hard, and you're not crazy for thinking that.
That's right.
Right.
You're not an outlier. Depending on your stroke, your aphasia, or those communication things that go with it, what you're feeling is
Mhm.
normal. And everybody, they're going to have their own version of it, but it's still normal. It's what we all would go through, but we show it in different ways.
It's the human experience. And I think some will say when they get on the other side of grief, meaning they have looked at it in its eyes and they're trying to understand it, they know how it will manifest in them physically or emotionally. They understand it so deeply now that they see it almost as a superpower because they now know how to connect better, to empathize better, to see the world differently. Whereas I know that you all know at least one person who's had a pretty charmed life with little to no adversity. How they show it for people is different. It's just different. It can be a powerful force for you once you do work through your own grief. That's meaning in connection and how you show up in life or how you perceive life as well. That's the
Mm.
end goal. But how you get there is we're going to name it in whatever way you can. It's writing, it's speaking, it's thinking, it's gesture, sitting with someone who just has a great listening ear or the ability to feel things even when you're not saying them. You may know someone like that, or it could be the person professionally sitting in front of you. I think that even has a lot of weight too, of someone who just gets it. And that's so powerful. So, first, we're going to understand what you're truly losing. And then we're going to go to the second part. Now, that might be, you might be able to work through that in a week, a couple of days, whatever it is. Or it could be an ongoing thing that you're going to discover new things as you go about your life of what you're losing. Naming it and understanding what you're feeling through that grief is important. Second is the letting go, which obviously,
Let it go. Like the three smallest words, but they have the biggest emotion.
yes,
Well,
that's
such little words have such
letting go doesn't mean saying I'm fine.
good.
It means saying I should be over this. It doesn't mean that someone should minimize where you are. That's not what letting go is. It doesn't mean you're completely releasing all of these things that you're feeling. Letting go is of the old life.
Mm.
That's the shift in grief. And that's with anyone's grief, whether someone died, a pet, there was a life prior, right? There's an event life. It's letting go of that and saying, my life has changed and I'm learning how to live inside this change. I'm learning how to be the person that I would like to be or learn new things that facilitate those things I'm missing. I'll give you an example. What are the new things that I want to do? I've already figured that out. I love to do these things with my friends. I love the business that I was in. I love being able to play ball with my grandkids. I understand that. On the first step, when we are deciding how grief is manifesting and how you got to where you are, what has happened within your life, you're taking those things and looking for ways to either involve yourself differently in them or creating something new from them. If you are someone who loves playing golf, and this could be anything, cards, you love the outdoors, it doesn't have to change, it may have to be modified.
Yes.
And so the modification of things that you really love is going to be important. If you just simply cannot do them, that's also going to be a part of the life that you are able to experience again. If you look at why people play a sport or why people play cards with each other, is it just for the cards itself? No. I mean, it's community, it's being able to go somewhere and talk. It's about being with friends. It's competitive. Like, what else could we do that's competitive? I know there's a lot of those out there. So I think there are elements to what you loved that will then translate into what you can do now.
Yes.
Letting go is not just one big moment. I love the burn exercise, which is basically writing or having someone write down what you want to let go of. Now, in that moment, you're honoring it, you are giving it space, but then the act of putting it into the fire symbolizes that you are ready to let go and look into the future. It's the reason why it's so important, like any ceremony, high school graduation, college graduation, weddings, funerals, like they're all really important. And it also signals to your brain an end. You can't fully grieve something until you have accepted it. Something like a ceremony or burn exercise is very powerful if you are present in that moment.
Love it. One of the most powerful things I did for myself personally was a burn ceremony.
Mm,
I'm a big journaler.
okay.
I don't do it every day, but when I
Yeah.
need it, it is
Mm,
a tool that I go back to. I'd like to pause and speak directly to my folks who have aphasia. If you cannot speak, we can find ways to help you express yourself. You can draw, we can get you colored markers, get you a big board to write on, paper, and you just start expressing it. Maybe you're not writing words, maybe it is just scribbling,
yeah.
maybe it's finding pictures. As a clinician, I could help find pictures to express emotions and they can identify which picture might line up with. They could explore and go a little deeper. Then I could find the words that convey that emotion and they can indicate in some way. I'd like to go back to my client example. Once he started realizing what he was doing and that he needed to grieve and that he was starting to reconnect with his wife, he went back to an old practice that he and his wife and the kids did. Come in the door at the end of the day, write one thing down, one good thing about the day or one thing of gratitude and put it in that jar. They were very purposeful because they always walked in through the front door. It was there on the entry table, pen, paper, gratitude, and this gorgeous vase. Every once in a while, they would sit down when they'd have a family meal and just pull out a couple of things and just look at it and share it. He had to acknowledge and start intentionally connecting with his wife, then took it to the next step, that practice of gratitude. May not work for everybody, but that was what really worked for him. And that also, he said, felt grounding because it was something they used to do. So it was
That,
like this lovely flow. And it's like, God, this is so powerful. So simple,
yeah.
doesn't cost any money, but does take some intention to make it happen.
I'm definitely taking that for my family.
I
I do gratitude saved my life. When I lost my sister, it felt like I was in that grief so long, or even just seeing the world differently. The lenses I was looking through weren't quite clear yet. So there's a point where gratitude really does help shift And your brain, and there's so many studies behind this now about gratitude and how it does rewire your brain. It's not just something that someone says anymore. It is an factual thing that it rewires your brain. So I think that's a beautiful way of doing it. And to take not only from something that they used to do as a family, but then also something that I think everyone could do in their own way is super important. With the colors or coloring or drawing, there was a time when my kids couldn't fully express themselves. So there was a book that had colors, and each color had an emotion tied to it. I think that's a great idea. There's a lot of correlation between color therapy and emotions. It stems from therapeutic modalities that you can use to express yourself. So I love that example. Yes, you're right. There are probably a lot of other things that you'll think of along the way as you
Yeah.
start working. That's great.
Could we talk about what might the spouse, partner, care partner, what could they be seeing in their person who is the aphasia survivor? What would clue them in that maybe their behavior is not because they're being mean, but that's how they're expressing their grief, or that they don't know how to express it, that perhaps the aphasia is such that's the only tool they have.
That knowing that you could be like, to not take things so personally. You have to learn that as a friend, as a spouse, as a parent, as someone you work with. This is just a common practice. Everyone needs to know that you don't know where someone's coming from every day, what their response will be, because their thoughts equal their feelings equal their actions. So, meaning their response. So, you just don't know. I think that's the first thing. In this process, you cannot take things personally. If they are showing up differently, I think that the loved ones will see that more. So, even with my own mother, the way that her eyes rest or her body language, I can tell when she is in a grief position in her life or there's something coming up. She may not think like, so I think it's like subtle cues that if they're not expressing themselves in any way and they are becoming more recluse, those are huge red flags. In those moments, do you give them space? Yes.
Ah.
If you don't, the other person may think, oh, she doesn't care.
Ooh, slippery slope.
Yeah. So if you're able to communicate with them and say, hey, I feel that this is happening. If I'm wrong, raise a hand up for me because I just want you to know that if it's space you need, great. So you can give a few words that they may relate to. Are you feeling this? Are you feeling that? And then you can note those things in your own journal as a caretaker of what do they respond to the most. Be a researcher. I know that you're probably online researching all the things about aphasia, but then you have to come back to your person and really start investigating them, being there for them, watching them as an observer, not as a fixer.
Yes.
What you have seen within someone caregiving, if they're a loved one, when it comes to trying to connect. Do you feel like that? I know that's probably difficult when you have to find new connection. Have they expressed that to you?
Oh, yeah. And so it manifests in lots of different ways. Speaking to care partners, so I'll take it from the care partners I know very well because
Okay.
either I just work with them or I work with their person or both. There's context. When you're posting on Facebook and you're venting and reaching out, there's not always a lot of context that goes with it. I perceive that these care partners are taking behaviors very personally,
Okay.
or they have preconceived.
Yeah.
And now this is just even more strain on it. And they don't know how to navigate any of the difficulties they had before, or the person with aphasia is verbally striking out or they're ignoring them.
Wow.
So there's a lot of that. And I can't help somebody on a Facebook post, right?
Right.
You have to have this kind of face to face. You have to understand because you can pick up underlying currents.
And one thing that I'm really conscious of, especially online, is that I've had a lot of comments about where they are in grief and who they lost or who they're caring for and what that means. And you're right, there's not one sentence, there's not one thing that I can share with them other than something like this, like a podcast or something that's a little more in depth. But yeah, I totally understand that perspective. And I think that there's an amount of validation. And then there's a amount of that both parties need to establish, and that's control.
Yeah.
So you have the person who is healing and living with aphasia, and then you have the care partner. And the one who's living with it, the reason to let go and really observe your past and also understand what you're capable of now, all of that will give you control. You are in a battle of what that looks like when it comes to your healing. Have you ever met the person who had a surgery and they said that the doctor told them, you'll be up in 3 weeks? And their expectation was that they're going to be up and running and going to errands. What they don't account for is that our bodies, even from the cellular level, are healing and trying to understand itself as well, right? So, can you imagine all of that while also trying to navigate a relationship with someone? So, it's a lot.
Huge.
Obviously, you can eat well and drink your water and take your meds, blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah, whatever. That's in your control. But as far as emotionally, there's not a whole lot of you can control with the changes, but you can control how you will look at that, the perspective, how you will move forward with these changes that honor you and what you love to do or what you love to listen to. So I think that's one thing is the control on their part. Like care partner, control does not look like, okay, now I am going to, yes, making sure their medications are in order or that they're getting to where they need to be. But you're not in control of them, period. So if you want to choose to show up with, you've done your own therapy because this person has created trauma or anything that may be obviously triggering for you, that's great. But how you're going to show up and the boundaries that you're going to put for yourself is also very important as a care partner. You can put boundaries. It doesn't mean you're a bad person at all. It just means that if you're going to show up for that person in more of a medical caregiving way, do it, show up and say that you're going to do that. And then everything else, as far as where you're going to get your respect, your love, your attention, it just can't be from that person if that's not possible for them to give. Where are we finding that?
Could we pivot back to the survivor and give them some tangible things to think about to wrap up
Yeah.
this episode?
Okay. The third one would be to embrace. We've talked about accepting it and letting it go. We're being our own investigators in that process too. But how are we rebuilding? What is possible now? What is possible now?
That's right.
That is a tough one to fully sit with, and I understand that. But I would love, with the gratitude of saying, I miss this. This mattered to me. And but today I can XYZ and I can see the strength in me through the process. There's gratitude within your day and how you're moving through, but to celebrate your wins, and that's daily. And that could be the smallest thing. To this day, I did this at night though. Some people love a gratitude guide in the morning, which is also great, but I love gratitude at night. I talk to myself. I go, what was great today? What am I thankful for? And if nothing really pops out, I'm like, the roof over my head, the warmth of this amazing blanket that Susie gave me, whatever it is, I'm grateful for that. Because also your brain has this connection with it. I'm holding my blanket right now. I love a robe, by the way. I'm a robe person. I think they are great to like hug you. And so I think there's different ways of looking at gratitude, and it doesn't have to be some profound thing. Yeah.
That's right.
The other thing is the win. So the win of your day could be within your therapy, your speech therapy, or within something that you really have been focusing on that you wanted to implement that day, like drinking more water, that you wanted to maybe express yourself through a creative form more, that you wanted to do more puzzles, whatever it is that you could bring to your life. I want you to really observe that and look at that as a win, because when you do, that's when your brain is, yes, she or he really loved doing that. It gave us all the good juices. Let's go. And look, that's how bad habits start too. So it goes both ways. The other thing that I really love to do is, what do I want to change, or what could I make better for tomorrow? That's why I like to do it at the end of the day, because it sets my dreams, my sleep, and then into the next morning of how I'm going to make this better. That usually ends your day with something. Yeah, maybe I observed that I watched a little bit too much TV and was not productive in the things that I wanted to do. But tomorrow's new. I'm going to change that.
Very good.
Tomorrow I am going to connect with someone differently. Even if you're just laying in bed at the end of the day, that's when you remember to do it. Show yourself compassion every single day.
I love this. Megan, thank you for taking this time to talk to our aphasia survivors. There's going to be a second episode, and Megan and I are going to continue. We're going to talk about specifically care partners, whether you're the spouse, the significant other, you're an adult child. These all will apply. So do join us on the next episode.
Rehab ends, recovery doesn't. Rebuild communication, rebuild connection, rebuild life. This is Life Beyond Aphasia.